Okay, everybody. I think it's about 5 minutes after the hour now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world right now. Today we're going to be talking about enabling business success with APIs. So this is going to, focus in on a variety of different business drivers around, why organizations, enterprises are investing in APIs, investing in infrastructure to support their APIs, and the sorts of business objectives that are ultimately driving them to do that. First off, though, a few little housekeeping topics. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so you can reach out in a couple of different ways. The first being the chat window in the webinar itself, and the second via Twitter if you prefer, and if you use the hashtag L7webinar, and we'll be able to pick those up. Like I said, we'll take your questions at the end. There is a whole range of other webinars, online content, and product information available about Layer 7 on our website, and so feel free to check that out or interact with us on Twitter, or myself on Twitter at GSSOR anytime. And so with that, we're going to dive right in. And just to sort of set the scene in terms of what we're going to talk about, we're going to start really from the very beginning. This webinar is intended to be very business oriented, but I thought the first step should be a quick level set on what APIs actually are and why they are important, and perhaps taking a look at some of the growth that we've seen in the API market over the past few years. Then we're going to take a look at some specific business objectives, because there are a whole range of reasons that organizations choose to invest in APIs to help their business. Then we'll think about what does it take to actually deliver these business goals. And then we'll do a brief introduction of the Layer 7 product, our API management platform. This is going to be very high-level introductory information on the product. Then we'll take questions at the end. So let's get started with what APIs actually are. I think it's a term that we're all very familiar with. Even business people that don't have a particularly strong technical background are probably vaguely familiar, at least, with the term API. And whether you know it or not, APIs are generally used extensively within our businesses and within our lives today. I think the traditional view of an API is really how software talks to each other. So it was at a component level, how software machines, modules within a program, different servers or applications, how they talk to each other. And it's a standardized interface in some certain programming languages or whatever that make it easy for applications to interact. And our businesses leverage this, rely upon it, in fact, across the board today. So all of the various software applications, platforms that we use on a daily basis rely upon these traditional APIs for work. And that's how software gets built. And so really anybody that's out there building software today is an API designer and an API user in their daily life. And those of us that actually consume these services are relying upon that interconnected framework to make things function correctly. So whether that's a CRM platform, some kind of logistics platform, billing systems, whatever, APIs are typically the fabric that brings these things together. But today, we're actually going to focus on web APIs. So the sort of natural transition or extension of the API concept into a world where we're now connecting applications and services over the World Wide Web. So in the past, like we said, APIs are very specific to an application environment or a programming language that you're using. Now APIs are actually being leveraged to talk across platforms using this ubiquitous connectedness that we have today via the World Wide Web and the public and private networks that we're connected to 24/7. So this could be leveraging SaaS-based applications, which are commonplace today, providing mobile access, providing social access, et cetera, et cetera. And so web APIs are really the fundamental connectivity for our businesses and for the products and services that we use from a consumer standpoint as well. And so we're actually surrounded by web APIs. Everything in our daily life is typically being powered in some way by an API. So if you check the weather today, you would have used an API. You perhaps didn't think about it, and it's something that's hidden to you as an end user. But this simple application that's representing the weather on your iPhone in this case is dumb on its own. It's just a presentation layer. The app itself contains no information. It just knows how to present information. And so it relies upon a back end to actually deliver the data to the application. And so an API is continuously feeding this app with the information it needs to serve you the weather for today or tomorrow or the rest of the week. So we're surrounded by APIs. And so then you think, well, why are they important? Clearly, we're using them all the time. And so I think the most important aspect of APIs is the fact that they are this fabric in our world today. They're providing connectivity for all types of services. And so we looked at a weather example, but it might be checking in for a flight or checking your bank balance or really any service that you can think of. There is ultimately an API infrastructure in the background that's powering all of those interactions and all of those experiences that we as consumers enjoy, or we as enterprises need to build for our employees and for our customers. And so APIs are super important. If we take a look at some of the types of companies that are investing in APIs, or at least have a very heavy dependence upon them, we start to see some interesting things. If I look at some of the startups and disruptive forces in the marketplace today, APIs are really the very core of what they do. They are perhaps the only experience that some of their customers see. So if I'm a Stripe customer, a very disruptive force in the payment industry today, Stripe's product is their API. That is the customer experience that I get to see. Their entire product is encapsulated in the API. And so making the API the very best that it can be is super important to them. And the same goes for all of these other companies. Twilio, a communications as a service company, relies upon their API to drive their business. They're basically allowing their customers to embed communication services into applications, and so the API is fundamental to how that works. Again, it has to be the best possible API. It has to represent their entire product. And so for all of these types of companies, they typically start from the ground up thinking about the API first. They need to design the API with an understanding that this is the product, and I can use it as a platform to support development in other ways. So when Twilio wants to build a test application on their website, it uses the API. They don't try and do some kind of back-end integration. The API serves as a core development platform for them and for their customers. And this is all very well, I suppose, if you're a startup, a brand new company, thinking about things with a fresh sheet of paper. If you're a well-established organization with lots of legacy infrastructure, then your world perhaps looks very different. And so, I can look across the healthcare industry and the financial services industry and the utilities industry and the telecommunications industry and think, well, I've got a lot of infrastructure that's providing the backbone of, the services and products that we offer to the market today that just works. It's been there forever. There could be some mainframe systems in here, a whole range of other legacy applications and platforms. And so it's certainly not an option to rip out all of this infrastructure that's served me well over the past few years. And so where do I bring APIs into my business strategy? Well, for these guys, it's typically a way to spawn a new wave of innovation. We're going to probably hear the word innovation quite a number of times this morning. And it's really quite key. Being able to extend the life, perhaps, of legacy platforms and applications is very important. Being able to transition infrastructure that was closed and used only for internal purposes into something that is perhaps more open, more available to mobile clients, or bridging into cloud-based services. And so really, APIs can help these companies continue to be innovative. The most important factor, really, for any business, innovation is quite key, and really is how they remain competitive. That's why they've been around for 30 years in some cases, or sometimes longer. APIs are actually even closer to our daily lives, though. I can look at a whole range of things in our lives that are controlled by APIs. And in many cases, consumers are actually using these services directly, these API services directly. So if anybody out there has the connected light bulbs from Philips, the Hue product, or have connected switches from Belkin, or connected car services from Carvoyant, or some wearable health device from Up. All of these products have a variety of APIs built in order to make them more useful to you as a consumer. And another really interesting service that helps bring all of this together is if this, then that, something that I'm sure many of you have at least played with in some way. And so it is actually an API platform at its core that's allowing me to orchestrate these various services together, but in a way that I, as a consumer, can easily understand. So I can make my Hue light bulb turn on if it's after 8 p.m. and I've just arrived home, or I can have my coffee machine turn on at 6:30 in the morning. And so I can create any range of these interactions by calling the APIs that are ultimately controlling these various services. So again, APIs are super important. They really are the very fabric of the world that we live in today. And the market has been expanding very, very rapidly. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. Perhaps the first is around the number of devices that are available to us today. We certainly see a massive uptick in the number of internet-connected devices. Probably each of us are carrying around 3 or 4 devices at any one time that can connect to a network. And so this leads to a massive rise in the number of connected machines and things in our world, and as a consequence, each of those machines or things is interacting with services via APIs. Similarly, the number of applications is also expanding rapidly. Every time we download an app, it's typically consuming a variety of back-end services. And again, APIs are the framework, the infrastructure that makes these applications work. And so if I look just at API growth, programmable web provides a nice directory, probably of not every API in the world, but certainly gives a listing of public APIs. We see, your typical hockey stick growth curve here too. In fact, I think by the end of 2013, we did reach over 10,000 APIs in their directory. So there's been massive growth over the past couple of years, and it shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. So there is huge growth. We've understood what an API is. We've looked at some of the things that are driving this growth, and some of the reasons why APIs are important to businesses. But I think we need to look specifically at what it takes to be successful with an API, or what an API strategy really means to your business. And perhaps the first thought that you might have is, well, we have APIs already. Sorry, I clicked past there. We have APIs in our business already. What else do we need? And I think it's important to note that deploying an API, actually building the interface, is the easy part. Understanding what it takes to deploy and build an effective API is difficult. And so what do we mean by an effective API? Well, it's quite simple, really. Effective means meeting business goals. And today, we're going to step through a number of specific business goals or objectives that are important to businesses as they think about investing in APIs, deploying effective APIs, and ultimately figuring out, what their strategy going forward is going to be. First things first, though, there's probably a few categories that we should talk about and understand a little better. And so I think we can probably think of APIs in three very straightforward ways. The first, private APIs. So these are used internally. They're not being exposed to the outside world in any form. They're being typically used to integrate back-end systems in some way. So this could be a way to have applications talk to each other. So this harks back to the beginning of APIs, the idea that applications and software have to interact. And so for many businesses, now that we live in a world of software from lots of different vendors, wanting to build products based on the services that are exposed in the software, we need to have APIs available inside our organization to make that easy. And so that's really the key with private APIs. We're using them as a platform to perhaps harmonize access to a bunch of back-end services, providing more agility to the business because you can build products more quickly because you've got this standard API layer. You have more flexibility too, and you're able to reuse that infrastructure many, many times. And ultimately, we're going to use that word again. Innovation is quite key here. APIs provide a platform for innovation, and internal use cases, private use cases for APIs, still represents probably more than 75–80% of the reasons for which organizations start to think about their API strategy. The next step is around partnerships. In many cases, APIs allow us to partner with other organizations in order to build new things. So this is not an open free-for-all. This isn't a public API strategy. This is an API that is being exposed to specific named partners that I have a business relationship with, trusted partners. And so we're able to achieve things like collaboration here, being able to achieve that 1 + 1 = 3 scenario where my product plus their product is something that's compelling to the market. And so I get to add value to what I'm doing as a business as well. A good example of this is the iBooks product from Apple. One of the features of that product is the New York Times bestseller list. And so Apple don't maintain that data. They don't have direct access to that information. New York Times own that data and maintain it. So Apple needed to partner with the New York Times in order to build that service, that capability into their iBooks product, adding value to the overall experience that customers see. And ultimately, partnering can be a way to recognize new types of revenue. There may be because of this added value, a way to generate more revenue from the products that you're building. And then the final model is public. Public APIs are sometimes the first thing that people think about. When we talk to some customers and talk about their API strategy, quite often they immediately jump to this idea of open access and developer communities and the long tail. And for some, that's an absolutely valid, sometimes essential business strategy. But in reality, it probably represents quite a small percentage of the overall market for APIs. So we're saying that there is an opportunity here. We can develop an API strategy that enables open access, where there is no pre-existing business relationship. But this is perhaps the third step along the road of API strategy for many customers, for many enterprises. And so, whilst it does have a variety of strategic benefits, such as driving brand awareness or unlocking the value of some internal data source in some way, we have to remember that there are lots of other reasons why organizations are thinking about API strategy. So with that, we're going to start to dig into the specifics of each of the 5 areas of a business goal that are important to organizations, or some of the things at least that are important to organizations as they invest in APIs. We're going to think about reach and retention. So this is really access to customers. We're going to think about integration because that requirement continues to become more and more important to organizations. We've already talked about how this world of connected devices continues to grow at a huge rate. So we'll talk about some of the specific use cases there, perhaps. Revenue generation is also really key. Where do I see revenue and value coming from my API strategy? And then we're going to talk about innovation, perhaps the most important of the 5 things here. So the first, reach and retention. What does this really mean? Well, ultimately, for a lot of organizations, we have to think about how we get access to new channels. How do we provide the product or service that we offer to new customers? How do I reach new customers? How do I reach new platforms? And so I think some of the key things here are around mobile, being able to distribute our company's assets or products in a mobile context, whether that's for employees or end users, customers. And again, social media is another platform that requires us to think about data interactions in a different way. How do I reach customers on Facebook if all of my assets are locked up behind a firewall by my IT department? And so in a world of traditional web applications, that sort of under lock and key scenario is really quite common. There is this front end, the web application that customers interact with, and that's the only experience they see. Customers, partners, applications have no programmatic access to your back-end infrastructure at all. There is just a web front end. So whilst these traditional web applications aren't going away by any means, there is a need to span these additional platforms that we've talked about. Mobile and social apps actually need to access the same data as the web application, but they need a programmatic way to do so. So when I think about the business, the idea of keeping all of these critical services, all of the intellectual property locked up behind a firewall is over. That world has long since passed us by. And so we have to think about how we open up that firewall and provide controlled access for these new platforms. To do that, we need a web API. We need to be able to provide a standardized, secured, and controlled way for these new platforms to access the same data that the web app has accessed for years. And an API give us that mechanism. And so, taking a couple of examples, perhaps, Netflix is a great one because, okay, they started as a DVD by mail company, but if we think to them becoming a streaming service, an on-demand streaming service, the first evolution of that product was the web application, being able to access Netflix.com and get access to their catalog. And quickly, that became, access to other platforms. So we started to think about, well, can I provide Netflix to games consoles and smart TVs and mobile platforms? And so the strategy that Netflix had here was providing API access to the Netflix infrastructure so that each of these very different platforms, be it mobile or smart TV or games console, could access and benefit from the Netflix service, ultimately expanding their reach and being able to provide service to more customers on more platforms. At eBay have a similar strategy. They do allow third-party applications to connect to the eBay open platform. And the revenue that's generated from this open access has been hugely beneficial to eBay. I think their gross merchandise volume is somewhere in excess of $7 billion via the third-party apps built on eBay's open platform. So there are lots of good examples of how APIs are being used to expand the reach and the customer retention of goods and services. The next thing we're going to talk about is integration. Integration is, like I said, a continuously changing world, especially for organizations that have probably kept all of their corporate data, again, locked inside their organization. And now, either from demand from customers or for cost efficiencies or a variety of other reasons, this idea of keeping everything locked up behind the firewall doesn't exist anymore. They're starting to leverage cloud services. So applications like Salesforce.com or other cloud-based storage are commonplace in almost any organization today. And so we have to think about, how do I provide access to those services and still tie into all of the back-end infrastructure that makes my organization work today. So that could be identity platforms, or it could be trying to provide new types of service that employees are going to be able to access from anywhere, like Salesforce.com, but ensuring that no sensitive corporate data is actually leaking outside and being made available to people that don't have the correct rights to access. So, like we said, we're starting to see a whole range of these platforms and services moving away from the core IT of businesses and out into the cloud. And so we have to think about how we provide connectedness between the two. So in this hybrid world of the new enterprise, how do we actually support this transition? Again, APIs are quite key here. APIs are providing a way to authenticate and authorize users to access information. They're providing a way to exchange data. So when I'm logged into a cloud-based service, I can perhaps access data that is stored inside the traditional IT environment. And so, as we said, applications like Salesforce.com, Dropbox, any other SaaS or cloud app are leveraging APIs to make it easy for organizations to support this hybrid model. The next area is connected devices. And so I think perhaps the most immediate thought that many of us have when we talk about connected devices or the Internet of Things is this concept that you're going to have a refrigerator that can tell when you're out of milk and place an order for you. And I think the reality is quite different. At least the immediate reality is quite different. There are a whole range of connected devices that exist out there from a consumer standpoint, for sure. But I think some of the most interesting use cases for the Internet of Things it comes into things like utility networks or transport networks, and also infrastructure services in smart cities, being able to provide a more integrated service and experience across these types of platforms. And so you have a whole range of devices, some of them, very small, lightweight, devices that need to perhaps consume information from the back end and publish information to a back end, are key to making these smart networks, these Internet of Things networks actually come together. And APIs are really providing the fabric to make that work. If I was to take a simple example, using the rail industry in North America, and so I think we would probably all agree that the rail network in North America isn't widely known as the most advanced network in the world, but it does have a variety of smart technologies deployed in order to make it more efficient. So they can monitor speeds of trains going across the network. They can detect areas where the network could be potentially damaged. They get to monitor where various pieces of infrastructure are perhaps congested or failing. And so by having this distributed network of sensors and connected devices, they're able to make the whole network more efficient. So you have this world of devices distributed across the country, all continuously pushing data into a central control environment. So all of these devices are pushing data via an API back and forth into this centralized environment. And also then the centralized environment has to be able to make changes, control the network in some way. And so these connected devices are relying upon APIs in order to make this work. So there's a whole range of great examples here. From a consumer standpoint, we're probably very familiar with the smart connected thermostats from Nest, now a Google company, and some of the interesting things that Cisco are doing from a smart cities perspective is also really good examples of how APIs are driving the Internet of Things in genuine connected devices. The next thing we're going to talk about is revenue. Revenue is quite often thought to be one of the most important aspects when people consider their API strategy, and rightly so. There are a huge number of opportunities for certain types of companies to leverage APIs as a revenue source and as a way to grow their business into new channels and new markets. So, if I'm a content company, if I own content in some way, or if I'm some kind of service provider, having an API is pretty core to my business. I couldn't survive without it, and so I can charge for access to my goods and services that are being consumed via the API. And so really any kind of service provider fits this model quite nicely. And then you can start to think about the types of business models that could be applied. We're going to think about a couple here. The first really straightforward example is API usage. In many cases, simply charging for access to the API doesn't make a lot of sense, but it can. If there is an inherent cost and an inherent value being delivered for each API call, then there is a genuine reason to charge for access. In a lot of cases, companies charge tiered models to support this API usage scenario. So you may have a certain amount of capacity for free, then you can step up into varying levels of service and cost. We've seen, these types of usage models perhaps succeed and in some cases fail. I suppose the biggest word of warning here is, if you're thinking about charging for access, you have to fully understand what that means to your customer. You can't have push a huge cost burden onto applications that rely upon your API, and because the economics perhaps doesn't make sense to them. And the other cautionary tale, I think, that's very important is complexity. We have seen in a number of industries where they make the billing model so complicated that customers don't understand it, and so they're immediately turned away. But ultimately, charging for access is something that can make sense and is successful in some scenarios. The next thing we're going to talk about, or the next business model we're going to talk about, is this idea of paying the partner, paying the application. I'm not going to go through each of these, but there are a whole range of ways in which, because the partner is distributing my service, I make money, and so they should be compensated in some way. Affiliate marketing is a great example of this, where essentially you're providing access to your service via an API, and so a partner can give you reach into a new channel, and so that new channel represents revenue, and so you share that between yourself and the partner. There are simpler examples for things like revenue share. Ad placement is a good one, where if I own advertising space and Google would like to use that inventory, I can receive a fair market value for the inventory, the advertising space that I own. Google will ultimately pay me for that. And then you've got simple things such as cost per action, cost per click, that sort of model, where a partner will get paid for actions that get completed. So this could be sales that reach completion because somebody clicked on a link or followed through a specific action. So there are a whole range of potential business models with APIs. Sometimes you're charging for access, sometimes you're sharing revenue to the partner, sometimes you're providing completely free access. And there are a whole range of examples in this space. Twilio is a good one that shows us, charging for access. I pay for every SMS I send. Expedia, a great example of affiliate marketing. Around about $2 billion worth of revenue to Expedia relies upon their affiliate marketing program. And so that's been a hugely successful business model for them and for their API. Google Maps is another interesting one because you immediately think, oh, Google Maps is free, and in reality, it's not. It's only free in a scenario where you're not making any money. If you are charging for some product or service that is powered in some way by Google, then they want to charge you for the data that they're providing. And the final thing is innovation. And like I said up front, this is perhaps the most important factor when any organization is thinking about investing in APIs. Ultimately, building products is what makes companies successful, and APIs make it easier to build products. It's that simple. It allows us to extend the usable life of existing applications and services and infrastructure in our businesses today, transitioning them from legacy into something that's more applicable to mobile access or cloud access. And ultimately, you're empowering people to build something. You're empowering both internal innovation and, in some cases, external innovation via partners or a completely public API strategy. And so this, in many cases, is the one primary reason why APIs make sense for your business right now. So if we were to think about who's doing it, well, frankly, everybody. Any company that considers itself competitive, anybody that is building new products, staying ahead of the curve, relies upon their ability to innovate, and APIs help them to do that. They have an inherent platform built within their organization that makes it easy to innovate, makes it easy to build new products. Amazon's probably the best example of that, but there are some other great ones. Evernote has become a fantastic platform with a bunch of applications and products built off of the Evernote API. The fact that 90% of the API traffic is private, internal use, is kind of irrelevant. They're using it to build products and be innovative. In fact, if we were to take a page out of our current president's book, if anybody saw the State of the Union this week, just a couple of days ago, innovation was one of the key things that he talked about. He actually said that we know the nation that goes all in on innovation today will own the global economy tomorrow. And I think that any organization that's thinking about how they continue to grow needs to keep that concept, that thought front of mind. Innovation is quite key in being successful and being competitive. And so who's going to do it? Looking at some research from Layer 7, we see that almost 90% of all organizations within the next 5 years are going to have some kind of API program in place. And there are a whole range of reasons driving this particular goal, but some of which we've talked about today. And I would encourage you to take a look at this infographic. There's some quite interesting and compelling information there, and definitely supports the idea that APIs are really important to all organizations today. So what does it take to actually deliver on these business goals? Well, I think we've shown that the business goals are really quite varied. And the result of that, or I guess as a byproduct of that, the technology requirements behind them are quite varied. In some cases, we're thinking about cloud brokerage and being able to provide connectivity to SaaS applications or other cloud-based services. Sometimes we're thinking about mobile enablement or turning your back end into a service that can be exposed to new platforms, be it mobile or social. Sometimes we're thinking about internal developer environments. How do I support internal innovation? Sometimes we're thinking about, simple reuse and re-architecturing of our organization. So whether that's turning really old mainframe technologies into, more mobile-friendly interfaces, or simple things like turning your old SOA architecture into an API-oriented world. There's a whole range of technology requirements that go alongside these business goals. And so, as you might expect, this kind of leads us into buyer segmentation. There are a whole range of different reasons to buy API management technology. And so we think about, from a corporate strategy perspective, how can APIs make me money? I might be in central IT. How do I make my IT infrastructure more efficient, more secure? Maybe I'm trying to build new products for the web. Maybe I'm a startup, and the API is going to be the most important thing in my life and my business. So there are a whole range of different buyers for API technologies today. And there are a whole range of different reasons people buy, right? For some it's an emphasis on scale. For some it's security. For some it's monetization, flexibility, ease of use. The list may go on and on. And so, again, there are a whole range of different reasons for which people are thinking about APIs and the API technologies that support them. And finally, there's this concept of delivery. How do I, deliver the API infrastructure that's going to support my business? In some cases, this is going to be all SaaS, cloud-based service. For some, it's going to be an on-premise solution. For some, it could be a combination of these things. So there are a whole range of different delivery models that are available to us when we think about our API infrastructure. And so despite all of these quite diverse requirements, both business and technical requirements, we can realize our API goals, our business goals, via a single product. And of course, we're talking about API management. The API management platform from Layer 7 is the market leader, according to a recent Forrester Wave on API management platforms. Actually, it's almost a year old, but it's still the most recent from Forrester. We are the market leader today. And so, this is probably the first time that the analysts have said API management is a defined category, and we fully understand the business requirements and the technical requirements that API management can serve, and so that's what we've talked about today. So, I promised you a quick introduction to the Layer 7 platform. We think of it in two ways. We think of the API management gateway. So this is providing all of the access to data and services, providing all of the integration capabilities, being able to extend the life of legacy apps that we've talked about, bridging traditional IT with cloud and mobile. And so the gateway is really the core part of the API management solution. And the API portal provides us the configuration, the management tooling to manage the overall platform. So this is both for API administrators and API developers, providing us tools like reporting and analytics, and a way to ultimately configure what is made available and who gets access to what. So quickly in summary, I think we've understood today that APIs are central to the modern enterprise. And they serve a whole range of different use cases, both business and technical. And layer 7 sits in the middle of all of these. We are able to deliver APIs quickly and securely for all of the various business goals that we talked about today, whether it was reach and retention, whether it was connected devices, whether it was integration, whether it was monetization or revenue ability, or simply, and most importantly, building new products, supporting innovation. So with that, we're into the last 5 minutes or so of the session this morning, and I'd be very happy to take some questions. So let me make sure that I can see the questions. So the first one that we'll take is the affiliate program and the pricing model. So I think I touched upon this in some ways. The first, I guess, most important example is this concept of supporting new channels. And so if I'm using my API to reach new channels and via a partner or via an affiliate, I have to reward that affiliate in some way. So the Expedia example is probably the best, where they provide their booking engine, their reservation engine, to partners. And as partners successfully sell flights and hotel reservations, the Expedia ultimately shares some revenue with the partner that closed the deal. And this is quite common across a whole range of industries and organizations, and really provides a great way to expand the reach of your products and services. So hopefully that answered your question around affiliate marketing, affiliate programs. The next question I see here is around SOAP services. I think we didn't really get into the technicalities of different API styles today, but we know for sure that SOAP is still the predominant style that's out there today, around which, yes, there are a whole range of industry standards, best practices, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we often tell people is, if that is what you've got today and it works for you and there is no immediate requirement or driver to change, then there's no point ripping it out and replacing it. In some cases, you may find that you will come across a new requirement, such as providing mobile access to these services that will force you to change to a URI style API or a RESTful style API. But in that case, you can provide a simple conversion, and you can still leverage the infrastructure that you've got in the back end. I would actually point you towards our API Academy, because in that environment, our API Academy team talks quite a lot about API design, best practices, and the sorts of questions and concerns that come up when we think about URI style, hypermedia style, RESTful style APIs versus the more traditional SOAP interfaces. And just perhaps to finish that thought, mobile apps, there's been a lot of questions about mobile applications. I think the most important requirement for mobile applications is trying to make your data exchange and connectivity as simple and lightweight as possible. So mobile apps can leverage APIs, any type of API, but you have to start to think about, when I've got a device that's connected to a cellular network, how do I most effectively connect to the back end? So I probably want to use lightweight API, something that's easy to integrate to an app. I also want to think about what I'm actually transmitting over the wire. You want as little as possible. Something like SOAP is very heavyweight because you've got a lot of XML that's wrapping up the actual content of the message. So URI style interfaces are more important, or are more applicable. And then you start to think about some of the authentication authorization tools that go alongside that. Again, the infrastructure around some of the SOAP WS star standards that work within an enterprise aren't really valid when we start to think about mobile access. I guess a simple housekeeping question. The slides will be made available. The webinar is actually going to be made available, so you can re-watch it again, distribute it to your colleagues. So you will no doubt get a notification once the slides and webinar has been made available. And so with that, I'm going to wrap up. I think we're done with questions for the day. If you've got any other questions that come to mind after the fact, feel free to reach out to us at Layer7 on Twitter or at GSSOR for me directly, and we'd be very happy to answer you as best we can. Thanks everybody for your attention and time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and look out for the next in our series of webinars coming up again soon.